I was about to sign $1 million check to Silvercrest Shelter Home when a young nurse came down the hallway, gently guiding an elderly black woman with silver hair and trembling hands. And the woman looked at me, not like a stranger, but like a sunrise she'd waited her whole life to see, and said, "Dex, my sunshine." The pen froze in my hand. My chest did too. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the air smelled of antiseptic mixed with something old and hollow, like hope that had given up waiting. The nurse, Hope Johnson, apologized quickly, explaining that her patient sometimes had these episodes, these moments of delusional recognition, where she'd mistake visitors for people from her past. She mentioned that Jane talked about a boy she'd raised, a white boy who loved building towers from cereal boxes and called her Mama Jane. The nurse's tone was professional, sympathetic, dismissive. But that name, Sunshine, put a crack straight through the life I'd been told to remember. I'm Dexter Ward, CEO of Ward Global Holdings. Navy suits, skyline offices, the kind of wealth that gets buildings named after your family. I'm the adopted son of Edward and Eleanor Ward, the industrialists everyone in this city knows because their names are etched in marble at museum entrances and hospital wings. I grew up hearing a clean story. My caregiver had to leave when I was young. There were complications. It was handled properly. I was better off with the Wards. And I never asked too many questions because the penthouse was comfortable and the trust fund was substantial and the legacy was already written. You know what I mean? But when Jane lifted her trembling chin and found my eyes, something simple and warm broke through. A kitchen that smelled like cinnamon, hands braiding my hair while humming off key. The weight of being held while someone promised the sun always comes back. A cardboard tower I called a castle, and a woman who never corrected me, only helped me build it higher. And I heard myself ask, my voice strange in my own ears, "What did you just call me?" If you're already invested in Dexter and Jane's story, tap that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what he's about to discover will change everything. You won't want to miss what happens next. Now let's continue. I made it to the board meeting. That should count for something. My driver had gotten me there on time, delivered me to the 63rd floor of Ward Global Holdings like he'd done 1,000 times before. I'd walked past reception, rode the executive elevator, and settled into my leather chair at the head of the conference table, surrounded by 12 of the sharpest financial minds in the city. And I didn't hear a single word they said. Third quarter projections show significant uptick in the Asian markets, particularly. Dex, my sunshine. Recommend we divest from the pharmaceutical holdings before. You're my little builder, my sunshine. Dexter? Your thoughts on the Singapore expansion? I blinked. 12 faces turned toward me, expectant. My CFO had his pen poised over his tablet, waiting. I trust your judgment, Richard, I heard myself say. Move forward with your recommendation. A pause. In 7 years of leading this company, I'd never deferred a major decision without at least 3 follow-up questions. Are you sure? This is a $200 million commitment. I'm sure. I stood, buttoning my jacket. I need to step out. My assistant Jennifer practically jogged to keep pace in the hallway. Mr. Ward, your calendar, you have the philanthropy committee in 20, then the mayor's office called. Cancel them. I'm sorry? I stopped at my office door. Cancel everything. Today, tomorrow. I'll let you know when I'm ready to reschedule. Her pen hovered over her tablet, caught between professionalism and concern. In 2 years, I'd never canceled anything. Mr. Ward, is everything all right? The question landed harder than it should have. This morning I'd woken up as Dexter Ward, billionaire CEO, man with his life mapped out in quarterly reports. Now I wasn't entirely sure who I was. Personal matter, I said. Nothing to worry about. I closed the door before she could press further. That night, my penthouse felt too empty. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, expensive scotch warming my hand, and let the memories come. Not complete, not coherent, Just fragments. Warm hands braiding my hair. Not Eleanor Ward's manicured fingers, but hands that were rough in places, gentle everywhere. The smell of cinnamon soap. Not French-milled luxury bars, but something simple that filled a small kitchen with sweetness. Someone singing off-key, making up words. A voice that was happy, genuinely happy, about sunshine and rain and promises. And the towers. A kitchen floor. Morning light through lace curtains. Cereal boxes. Cheerios. Cornflakes. Off-brand rice puffs, stacked with architectural precision. Look, Mama Jane, it's a castle. The biggest castle I've ever seen, baby. You're going to build real ones someday. The glass nearly slipped from my hand. The official story. I knew it by heart. Had recited it to therapists, to friends, to myself. Your caregiver had personal difficulties, mental health issues. The state removed you. We gave you stability, education, opportunity, a real family. Edward and Eleanor Ward. They'd adopted me at 5, raised me in a mansion, sent me to schools where tuition cost more than most people's salary. I'd had everything except the first 5 years of my life. The story was neat. My caregiver left. Wasn't stable, wasn't suitable. And I'd accepted it, never questioned it. Some people aren't meant to be parents, son. But you were meant to be a Ward. Case closed, story complete. But now those gaps felt less like gaps and more like excavation sites, places where something had been deliberately buried. I pulled out my phone, typed Jane Norrison into Google. Nothing. No profiles, no records. Just a white screen and suggested spellings. I tried variations. Jane Norrison plus Ward. Jane Norrison plus Philadelphia. Jane Norrison plus caregiver. Still nothing. It was like she didn't exist, like someone had erased every public trace of her. I pulled down the photo albums from my den shelf, spread them across the coffee table. Page after page of Dexter Ward growing up privileged and perfect. But nothing before age 6, not a single image. I opened my laptop, found Silvercrest's basic website. Read the director's plea for funding, the list of needs. The Ward Foundation funded places like this without blinking. The Ward Foundation, my father's legacy, built on strategic philanthropy and careful image management. Some people aren't meant to be parents, son. What if it wasn't fact? What if it was just the easier story? This was irrational. One encounter with an elderly woman who probably had recognition issues, who probably mixed up visitors constantly. But she'd called me Sunshine, and I remembered the song. I opened my phone's calendar, stared at the blank space Jennifer had cleared. Tomorrow was empty now. I could fill it back up, reschedule everything, trust the story, move forward like I always had. Or I could go back to Silvercrest, just to follow up on the donation. Make sure the funds were being allocated properly. Due diligence. That's what I told myself as I texted Jennifer to keep my calendar clear through the week. That's what I told myself as I set my alarm for early morning. That's what I told myself as I finally went to bed in my too-big penthouse. Just following up on a donation, nothing more. But when I closed my eyes, I heard humming, off-key and playful and full of promises about sunshine after rain. Tomorrow, I'd go back. Not because I believed anything was wrong, just to be sure. I arrived at Silvercrest before 9, earlier than any billionaire had business showing up at a struggling shelter home. The morning shift was just starting, nurses in scrubs carrying clipboards, orderlies pushing breakfast carts, the institutional machinery of care grinding into motion. Hope Johnson nearly dropped her medication tray when she saw me in the hallway. "Mr. Ward." She recovered quickly, professional smile sliding into place. "I wasn't expecting. We didn't have you on the schedule. I should have called." I felt suddenly awkward in my business casual, expensive but understated, the kind of thing I wore to seem approachable at charity events. I wanted to follow up on the donation, make sure everything was processed correctly. It was a lie. We both knew it was a lie. But Hope had the grace not to call me on it. Of course. The director will be thrilled to speak with you. She adjusted the tray in her hands, and I noticed the care in how she handled it. No rushing, no impatience. You know, most donors just wire the money and move on. It's rare when someone actually cares about where it goes. I like to be thorough. I can see that. Something shifted in her expression. Assessment, maybe. Or recognition of a fellow person who didn't quite believe their own excuses. Would you like a tour of the facility? See what your donation is helping with? Actually, I cleared my throat. I was hoping to speak with Jane again, if that's possible. Hope went very still. The background noise of the shelter, muted conversations, shuffling feet, a television playing somewhere, seemed to recede. Jane, she repeated carefully. Ms. Norizon, the woman from yesterday. I'd like to check on her, make sure she's doing well. For a long moment, Hope studied me. Not with suspicion exactly, but with the kind of careful evaluation that comes from working with vulnerable people and learning to spot the difference between genuine interest and something darker. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. She's in the common room. But Mr. Ward, I should tell you, Jane talks about a boy she raised, has for years. Most of the staff think it's just confusion, memory blending with fantasy. Happens a lot with long-term residents. But you don't think that. Hope's eyes met mine, dark and direct. Jane is too specific, too consistent. She doesn't just remember a boy, she remembers details. What he liked for breakfast, how he'd line up his toys in perfect rows, the way he'd cry if his bedtime routine changed even slightly. She paused. Most delusions are vague. Jane's memories are surgical. My chest felt tight. How long has she been here? Almost 15 years, transferred from Meadowbrook Psychiatric Facility. Before that, I think Greenhill, but her records from that far back are incomplete. Hope shifted the medication tray again. She's never had a visitor. Not once in all that time. The weight of that settled over me like ash. Can I see her? The common room smelled like weak coffee and old upholstery. A television played a morning talk show no one was watching. 3 residents sat scattered around the space. One doing a crossword puzzle, another staring out the window, a third asleep in a wheelchair. And Jane, sitting by herself near the window where sunlight caught her silver hair and made it glow like a halo. She looked smaller in the daylight, more fragile. Her worn blue cardigan was buttoned wrong, and her hands rested in her lap, fingers occasionally plucking at the fabric of her floral dress like they needed something to hold. Jane, Hope's voice was gentle as we approached. You have a visitor? Jane looked up, squinting against the light. Her eyes passed over me without recognition, confusion creasing her brow. I don't... Who? My stomach dropped. Of course. Yesterday had been an episode, a moment of misplaced memory. I was nobody to her, just another stranger in a long parade of forgetting. It's all right, Hope started to say, but I was already lowering myself into the chair beside Jane's. Hi, Jane. My name is Dexter. I visited yesterday. You called me something. Did I? She looked genuinely distressed now, embarrassed. I'm sorry. I do that sometimes. Get people mixed up. The nurses say my brain plays tricks. It's okay. I just wanted to check on you. Make sure you're doing well. Jane nodded vaguely, already losing interest, her attention drifting back to the window. I should leave. Let her have her peace. Stop chasing ghosts in an old woman's failing memory. But then she started humming. Soft, almost inaudible. A melody so simple it might have been a children's song. Might have been something she'd made up decades ago and somehow held on to through all the years and facilities and forgetting. My hand started trembling. I knew this song. My little sunshine, I whispered, the words coming from somewhere deep and buried, somewhere I'd locked away and lost the key to. When the rain comes down. Jane's humming stopped. Her whole body went rigid. "Mama's love will always come around," I finished, my voice cracking on the last word. Jane turned to look at me, and this time her eyes weren't confused. They were sharp, clear, filling with tears that caught the sunlight and spilled down her weathered cheeks. "You remember," she breathed. "My boy remembers." Her hand found mine, gripping with surprising strength. The touch was electric, immediate and familiar, like muscle memory my body had kept, even when my mind had let go. "You used to build towers," Jane said, words tumbling out urgent and desperate, like she had to get them out before the moment shattered. "From cereal boxes. You'd line them up so carefully, tongue sticking out while you concentrated, and if they fell, you'd cry like the world was ending, but then you'd start building again. Always building." My throat was too tight to speak. "And bedtime stories. You'd make me read the same one 3 times. The Little Engine That Could. You'd recite it with me by the end, knew every word." She squeezed my hand. "And counting. Teaching you to count. You'd point at everything. Stairs, buttons, cracks in the sidewalk. My curious boy, my little builder, my sunshine." I was crying. When had I started crying? "Who are you?" The question came out broken, desperate. "Who were you to me?" Jane's other hand came up to touch my face, trembling fingers tracing features like she was trying to memorize them, or remember them, or reconcile the man before her with the boy she'd lost. "I was your Mama Jane, baby. I took care of you, loved you, until they came and took you away and said I wasn't fit, wasn't right, wasn't enough." Her voice broke. But I never forgot. Not one single day. Not one. Behind us, I heard Hope's sharp intake of breath, and my world, every carefully constructed piece of it, tilted on its axis and refused to settle back into place. I couldn't leave. The common room's institutional chairs weren't built for comfort, and my back would complain later, but I stayed. Through the lunch cart rattling past, through the shift change at noon, through the afternoon sun moving across the floor in slow geometric patterns. Jane talked. Not in straight lines. Her memory didn't work that way anymore, but in fragments that felt more true than any organized narrative could have been. "The big house," she said, staring at our joined hands like they might disappear if she looked away. "I worked there. Marble floors, so cold in winter. I'd polish them until they shined like mirrors. And the kitchen, big enough for 3 of my old apartment. Whose house? Important people, rich people, the kind with their names on buildings." She frowned, concentrating. "Ward. The name was Ward. Mr. Edward Ward and his wife. They needed help with me? A baby. They said they adopted a baby, but you weren't a baby. You were almost 2 when you came. So serious. Eyes that looked like they'd already seen too much." Her thumb rubbed circles on my hand. "They said temporary. Just until they found permanent staff. But you'd cry when anyone else tried to hold you. So I stayed." The memories came in flashes. Her making breakfast while I played on the floor. Her singing while she cleaned. Her reading to me at night in a room that wasn't the one I remembered from the Ward estate. Smaller, simpler, filled with second-hand furniture and love. "Then the men came." Jane's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Men in suits. You were screaming, holding onto my legs, screaming, 'Mama Jane, don't go, Mama Jane.' They had to pry your fingers off. You were 5, just 5. A tear slid down her weathered cheek. "They said I was sick, said I'd gotten too attached, that it wasn't healthy. They said you'd forget me in a few weeks, that children always forget." "I didn't forget," I managed. "They made me forget." By 3 o'clock, Jane's words were slurring. Her eyes kept drifting closed, then snapping open like she was fighting sleep because sleep meant losing me again. Hope appeared at my elbow, gentle but firm. She needs to rest. This has been a lot. Jane's grip tightened. You'll come back? Tomorrow, I promised. And the day after. And the day after that. Promise? I promise. I caught Hope in the hallway as an orderly was helping Jane to her room. My hand on her arm, urgent, maybe too desperate. I need to see her files. Hope's eyes widened. Mr. Ward? Medical records, admission papers, anything you have. I need to know what happened to her, where she's been, why she's here. That's confidential. I could lose my job, my license. I know what I'm asking. I was aware of how I must look. Tie loosened, eyes probably red, billionaire CEO unraveling in a shelter home hallway. But something was done to her, something wrong, and I need to understand what. Hope studied my face for a long moment. The hallway sounds faded, just her dark eyes weighing something I couldn't see. If I do this, she said slowly, and anyone finds out, I'm not just fired. I'm unhireable, in any care facility, anywhere. I'll protect you. Whatever happens, I'll make sure you're protected. You can't promise that. I can? I will. I meant it. God help me. I meant it with everything in me. Hope's jaw tightened. Then she nodded once. Sharp. Give me until tonight. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks west. Grounds and Grind. Meet me there at 8. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived 10 minutes early. I ordered something I didn't drink and took a corner table where I could watch the door. Hope came in at exactly 8, canvas bag slung over her shoulder, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt instead of her scrubs. She looked younger out of uniform, and scared. She slid into the seat across from me, pulled a manila folder from her bag, and pushed it across the table. This is a copy. Basic file only. I couldn't access the full psychiatric records without triggering an audit, but it's enough. My hands shook opening it. Jane Norzen. Date of birth, March 15, 1953. Current residence, Silvercrest Shelter Home. Admitted June 2009. Previous residence, Meadowbrook Psychiatric Facility. Transferred from Green Hill Mental Health Center. 1998. Original admission, Green Hill Mental Health Center, April 1994. Diagnosis, mental instability, delusional attachment disorder. Patient claims false maternal relationship with minor child of former employer. My vision blurred. I forced myself to keep reading. Employment history, partial, heavily redacted. Domestic worker, redacted. Family estate, 1991 to 1994. Position terminated. Reason, redacted. But there, in the margin of a photocopied intake form, in handwriting that had faded but was still legible, Ward Family Estate, 1991-1994. And below that, stamped in red, do not release to media, sensitive adoption matter, see legal seal. The blood drained from my face. The coffee shop sounds, espresso machine hissing, low conversations, acoustic guitar from the speakers, became white noise. Mr. Ward? Hope's voice seemed to come from very far away. Ward. The name was right there. Not redacted, not hidden, just buried. Filed away in margins and stamps and codes that meant something to people who knew where to look. She wasn't delusional, I said. The words tasted like ash. They called her delusional, but she was telling the truth, and they locked her away for it. Hope leaned forward, voice low. If this is what I think it is, if your family had something to do with her institutionalization, then powerful people went to a lot of trouble to bury it. People who won't be happy if you start digging. I looked up at her, and something cold and certain settled in my chest. Then it's time to dig it back up. Hope held my gaze. I'll help where I can. But Mr. Ward, Dexter, you need to understand what you're starting. This isn't just about finding the truth. It's about what that truth might destroy. My father built an empire on charitable work, on helping people. I closed the folder, my hands surprisingly steady now. If he did this, if he had Jane declared insane and locked away just to keep his adoption clean, then that empire deserves to be destroyed. I left the coffee shop with the folder under my arm and my phone already dialing. The private investigator answered on the second ring. Marcus Chen. Mr. Chen, my name is Dexter Ward. I need you to find everything you can about a woman named Jane Norizon. Every facility she's been in, every doctor who treated her, every payment made on her behalf, and I need to know who authorized her original psychiatric commitment in 1994. A pause. This sounds sensitive. It is, and expensive. Name your price. When do you need it? I looked back at the coffee shop, at Hope visible through the window, still sitting at our table with her head in her hands. Yesterday, I said. But I'll settle for this week. Before we continue, I need to know, what would you do if you discovered your entire life was built on someone else's silence? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story is hitting you as hard as it's hitting Dexter, show some love with a like. It helps stories like Jane's reach people who need to hear them. Marcus Chen worked fast. Within 3 days, my phone was ringing with updates that made my blood run cold. But first, I needed to face the man who'd helped bury the truth. Gerald Hutchins had been the Ward family attorney for 40 years. His office occupied the top floor of a building my father had helped finance. Mahogany panels, Persian rugs, the kind of old money discretion that came with hourly rates most people couldn't imagine. He wasn't happy to see me. Dexter. He stood behind his desk but didn't offer his hand. You didn't need to come in person. Whatever you need, my associates. My adoption records. I want to see them. His expression barely flickered, but I caught it. The momentary calculation, the weighing of options. Those are sealed. Standard procedure for private adoptions. I'm sure you understand. Unseal them. I can't do that without a court order. Then I'll get one. I stepped closer to his desk. Or you can save us both the trouble and produce them now. Hutchins lowered himself into his chair slowly, every inch the dignified counselor. Dexter, your father entrusted me with sensitive matters. I have a duty to protect. My father is dead, and I'm asking about my own life. Either you show me those records, or I'll file suit against this firm for obstruction and start my own investigation into every adoption you've facilitated in the last 30 years. The threat landed. Hutchins' jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. Show me the file. He produced it from a locked cabinet, a thin folder that somehow contained the entire legal fiction of my early life. Adoption decree, finalized April 1994. Birth mother, unknown. Adoptive parents, Edward and Eleanor Ward. Child, Dexter. Michael Ward, age 5. Standard, clean, unremarkable. Except for the addendum on the 3rd page, partially redacted. Custody transfer by prior arrangement with domestic employee, terminated, redacted. Child to be raised as Ward family heir, all prior records sealed per family request. The date of termination, April 12, 1994. The same date on Jane's psychiatric commitment papers. Was her name Jane Norizon? My voice came out flat, dangerous. Hutchins said nothing. Answer me. I can neither confirm nor deny. Your silence is confirmation enough. I closed the file, tucked it under my arm. I'm taking this. That's privileged. Sue me. I was in the elevator before he could respond, my hands shaking so hard I could barely press the button for the ground floor. Marcus called that evening while I was staring at the adoption papers spread across my dining table. You're not going to like what I found. Tell me. Jane Norizon was declared mentally unfit for caregiving on April 14, 1994, 48 hours after your adoption was finalized. The psychiatric evaluation was ordered by Hutchins and Associates, your family's law firm. My grip tightened on the phone. The evaluating psychiatrist was Dr. Raymond Clifford. He lost his license in 2003 for falsifying psychiatric reports in custody cases. 3 other cases came to light where he'd declared perfectly stable women incompetent at the request of wealthy clients. Jesus. It gets worse. Jane was institutionalized immediately. No hearing, no appeal. She was sedated heavily for the first year. Transferred between facilities every few years. Always private institutions. Always quietly funded. Funded by who? Edward Ward's personal accounts. Not the foundation. His private money. Regular payments, like clockwork, for 29 years. Stopped 6 months after his death. The room tilted. I sat down hard. He kept her locked up, for 3 decades, just to keep her quiet. It looks that way. And Dexter, I found something else. A memo in the archived files from Hutchins and Associates. Dated April 1994. Send it to me. The email arrived 2 minutes later. I opened the attachment with hands that felt numb. Confidential memo. Re Norizin Matter. From Edward Ward. To Gerald Hutchins, senior partner. The woman was adequate help, but became too attached. The boy needs proper upbringing in a family of standing. Handle her discreetly. Whatever psychiatric designation necessary. Ensure proper care facility. Nothing that invites scrutiny. Compensation should ensure silence. This matter ends cleanly. I read it 3 times. Then I stood, walked to the wall where my father's portrait hung. The official one, oil on canvas. Edward Ward in his prime looking stern and successful. And I put my fist through it. The canvas tore. The frame cracked. My knuckles split and bled. I didn't care. Jane hadn't abandoned me. Hadn't been unstable. Hadn't left because she wanted to. My father had stolen me from her. Had her declared insane to silence her protests. Had locked her away in a series of hospitals and care facilities, and kept her comfortable enough that she wouldn't fight, wouldn't make noise, wouldn't ruin the pristine story of the Ward family adoption. And I'd never known. Had lived my entire life believing the lie. I grabbed my phone, ignoring the blood on my hand, and called Hope. She answered on the 3rd ring, voice concerned. Dexter? It's almost midnight. I need to know everything. Every facility Jane was in, every doctor who saw her, every medication they gave her, every payment made on her behalf. My voice was shaking. My father did this. He had her locked away, and I need to know exactly what he did to her. A pause. Then Hope's voice, quiet and determined. I'll start pulling records tomorrow. But Dexter, if we're doing this, if we're really digging into this, we need to be prepared for what we'll find. I don't care what it costs. I don't care what it destroys. I looked at the ruined portrait, at my father's face torn and hanging. She spent 30 years in institutions because she loved me, because she wouldn't let go, and my family erased her for it. Then we'll get her story back, Hope said. All of it, no matter what. I hung up and stood in my penthouse surrounded by luxury built on lies, blood dripping from my knuckles onto imported marble, and understood that everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, my legacy, all of it was fiction. The only truth was locked in a shelter home, humming lullabies and remembering a little boy who built castles from cereal boxes. And I was going to burn down my father's empire to give her back her name. Hope and I met in her car 3 days later, parked in a lot behind Silvercrest where no one would see us. She had her laptop open, face pale in the screen's glow. I accessed the interfacility transfer network, she said without preamble. Used my credentials to pull records from every care facility in the state that received Ward Foundation funding. And? There's a pattern, Dexter. Jane isn't the only one. She turned the laptop toward me. Names, dates, diagnoses that all read like variations of the same lie. Delusional attachment disorder, inappropriate maternal bonding, mental instability. 12 women, all former domestic workers, all institutionalized within weeks of their employers finalizing adoptions. The Ward Foundation funded every single facility that housed them, Hope said quietly. Not as charity, as payment. These places weren't rehabilitation centers, they were storage. My stomach turned. Your father built a system. Wealthy families adopt children raised by their staff, then, when the caregivers won't let go quietly, the Ward Foundation provides a solution: psychiatric commitments, private facilities, long-term care that looks like benevolence but functions like burial. Marcus had sent me more records that morning. Financial statements showing the foundation paid facilities to keep residents manageable. Code for sedated, isolated, forgotten. Some of the women died in those facilities, never saw their children again, never got to explain, never got closure. Jane was one of the survivors. Moved from high-security psychiatric hospitals to lower-security care homes over decades, gradually deemed less dangerous as her memories faded and her fight weakened. It's not charity, I said, voice hollow. It's a cover-up infrastructure. My father's philanthropic empire was built on stolen stories. Hope closed her laptop. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, but first, I need to see her. I brought Jane flowers, yellow roses, because yellow meant sunshine, and I wasn't ready to examine why that mattered. She was in her room this time, sitting by the window in the same worn cardigan, and when I knocked, her face transformed. Dex, my sunshine. Hi, Mama Jane. The name came out before I could stop it. She started crying immediately, reaching for my hands. I sat with her for an hour, not talking much, just being present. Her fingers were cold and thin, but her grip was strong. I never forgot you, baby, she said finally. Not one single day. Even when they told me you weren't real, that I'd imagined you. Even when the medicine made everything fuzzy. I held on to you right here. She touched her chest. Right here. Something in me shattered. I forgot you, I whispered. They made me forget you. I'm so sorry. Hush now. Jane's other hand came up to cup my face, the gesture so familiar it hurt. You were a child. They had all the power, all the money, all the control. But you're here now. That's what matters. You came back. Hope stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, and I understood that this moment, this simple, broken reunion, was bigger than just us. It was every stolen child, every silenced mother, every truth buried under wealth and respectability. Mama Jane, I said carefully, what if I could make this right? Not just for you, but for other women like you. Women who lost their children to families like mine. Jane studied my face. You want justice. I want the truth out. I want people to know what my father did, what the Ward Foundation enabled. I swallowed hard. But it means destroying my family's name, everything my father built. Do you want that? Do you want the world to know? Jane was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, sad and wise. I don't need revenge, baby. Never did. But if other mothers are out there, mothers who think they're crazy, who've been told their babies weren't real, then yes, I want them to know they weren't wrong. I want them to find their children. She squeezed my hands. I want this to stop. That night, alone in my penthouse, I opened my laptop and started typing. Statement from Dexter Ward, CEO Ward Global Holdings, regarding Ward Foundation practices and the systematic institutionalization of domestic workers. My hands shook. Each word felt like dismantling my life, brick by brick. The Ward name was on museums, hospitals, university buildings. My father was remembered as a benevolent industrialist, a philanthropic visionary. I was his heir, his legacy, his continuation. And I was about to burn it all down. The following information details a decades-long pattern of abuse disguised as charity. Hope had sent me everything, names, facilities, financial records. Marcus had provided the psychiatric evaluations, the falsified reports, the payments. I had enough evidence to destroy not just my family, but a network of wealth and power that had been erasing inconvenient women for 30 years. My father, Edward Ward, systematically institutionalized caregivers who refused to quietly disappear after their charges were adopted into wealthy families. Dawn was breaking over the city when I finally finished. The press release sat on my screen, complete and damning. One click. That's all it would take. I thought about Jane, humming lullabies in a shelter home. About the 12 other women whose names I now knew. About children who grew up believing lies because the truth was too messy for their families' images. About the little boy who built castles from cereal boxes and called a woman Mama Jane until men in suits taught him to forget. I clicked send and watched my father's empire begin to crumble. I went to the estate before the press release went live. Call it courtesy or cowardice, or the last thread of obligation to the people who'd raised me. Whatever it was, I owed Eleanor Ward a face-to-face conversation before I destroyed everything she held dear. The mansion looked the same as always, imposing, immaculate, every hedge trimmed to geometric perfection. I'd grown up here, but standing at the front door now felt like approaching a mausoleum. Eleanor was waiting in the drawing room, afternoon tea service laid out on the antique table. She wore pearls and a cream silk blouse, every silver hair in place. She didn't stand when I entered. Dexter. Her voice was cool. Gerald called. He said you've been making inquiries. More than inquiries. Sit down. Let's discuss this reasonably. I'm not here to discuss. I'm here to inform you. I stayed standing. I know what Father did to Jane Norizon. I know what you both did. Eleanor's expression barely flickered. Your father gave you everything. He saved you from a life of mediocrity, from being raised by someone who loved me? Yes, that would have been terrible. He stole me. The words came out hard. From someone who loved me, who took care of me, who never forgot me even when you made sure I forgot her. Eleanor set down her teacup with deliberate precision. Jane was help, Dexter. Good help, I'll grant you, but she became obsessed, inappropriately attached. The institutionalization was for her own good. Don't. My voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare rewrite this as kindness. You had her declared insane, locked away for 30 years. Sedated and silenced and erased. We gave her excellent care. Your father paid blood money, hush money, money to keep her buried so your perfect adoption story stayed pristine. Eleanor stood now, her composure finally cracking. We gave you the Ward name, a fortune, a future. What did she give you? Bedtime stories? Cereal boxes? She gave me love. I was shaking. You gave me lies. You gave me a legacy built on stolen lives and called it charity. You're being hysterical. I'm shutting down the Ward Foundation. I'm exposing everything Father did. The facilities, the payments, the other women. All of it. Eleanor's face went white. You wouldn't dare. The scandal, the family name. Good. I moved toward the door. We deserve it. I'll fight you. Legal action, the board, every connection this family has. Fight all you want. The truth is already documented. By tomorrow, the world will know exactly what kind of man Edward Ward was. He was your father. I stopped at the doorway, looked back at her standing among the antiques and art, and carefully curated symbols of respectability. No, I said quietly. He was a thief who stole a child and buried the woman who loved him. You're not my family, Eleanor. You never were. I walked through the house one last time, seeing it with new eyes. The marble entrance hall where I'd learned to walk quietly so I wouldn't disturb Father's business calls. The library full of first editions I'd been allowed to touch only with clean hands. The dining room where I'd eaten silent meals across an expanse of polished mahogany. all monuments to theft, to power wielded without conscience. I ended up in Father's study. Eleanor hadn't changed it since his death. Everything preserved like a shrine, his desk, his chair, his degrees and awards covering the walls. And in the corner, covered with a cloth, the old landline system Marcus had mentioned. Edward Ward never trusted cell phones, had kept his private line analog and archived. Marcus had hacked it remotely 2 days ago. Now I pulled the cloth off, found the playback device, and pressed play. My father's voice filled the room, preserved, damning, impossibly casual. "The boy's better off, Gerald. She was a good woman, I'll admit. Warm with him, but too visible, too emotional. A black woman raising our white son? People talk. The boy needs proper upbringing." A pause, the sound of ice in a glass. "We did her a kindness, really. A facility, consistent care, no financial worries. And he'll never know. He'll be a Ward, through and through, clean slate." I recorded it on my phone, hands steady despite the rage burning through my chest. The next message was to Hutchins. "Increase the facility payment. Whatever keeps her comfortable but distant. No visitors. No contact with anyone from her old life. This ends cleanly, Gerald. The Ward name doesn't get touched by scandal." More recordings. Years of them. My father discussing Jane like she was a problem solved, a loose end tied up, an inconvenience managed with money and institutional power. "Are you satisfied?" I turned. Eleanor stood in the doorway, her perfect composure shattered. She looked older suddenly, frailer. "You'd destroy your own family for her?" I saved the recordings, slipped my phone into my pocket. "You're not my family," I said again. "You never were. You were just the people who bought me and erased the woman who raised me." "Dexter, please." "Her name is Jane Norizon. For 30 years, no one spoke it. No one remembered it. No one honored it." I walked past her toward the front door. "Tomorrow, the world will know it, and they'll know exactly what the Ward family did to silence her. You'll have nothing. No legacy, no name, no respect. Good." I opened the door, felt autumn air on my face. Because everything I had was built on her silence, and I'm done being part of that. I left the estate, got in my car, and drove away without looking back. In my pocket, my father's voice was preserved, damning, casual proof that Jane had never been delusional, never been unstable, never been anything except an inconvenient witness to theft dressed up as adoption. By morning, the press release would go live, the recordings would be public, and the Ward empire, built on philanthropy and polish and carefully maintained lies, would begin its collapse. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exhausted and angry and grieving for all the years stolen from a woman whose only crime was loving a child who wasn't legally hers. But at least the truth would finally have a voice. And Jane Norizon would finally have her name back. Dexter is about to risk everything. His fortune, his name, his entire legacy. If you believe some truths are worth burning everything down for, hit that like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because the next chapter is the moment we've all been waiting for. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. at Ward Global Holdings headquarters. By 9:30, the lobby was packed with media, financial press, local news, national outlets, cameras and microphones creating a forest of equipment. My board of directors tried to stop me in the hallway. "Dexter, whatever you're planning." Richard Chen grabbed my arm. "The shareholders, the investors, you can't just watch me. We'll vote you out. We'll sue for breach of fiduciary duty. Do what you need to do, Richard. I'm doing what I need to do." I walked into the conference room alone. The cameras flashed immediately, a strobe of attention I'd courted my entire professional life. Today it felt different. Final. Behind the cameras, near the back, Hope stood with Jane in a wheelchair. I'd arranged transportation, made sure Jane was comfortable, promised her she could leave at any moment if it became too much. But Jane had insisted on being here. "People need to see I'm real," she'd said. "Not crazy. Real." I took my place at the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the sea of expectant faces. "Thank you for coming. My name is Dexter Ward, and I'm here to tell you about a crime that's been hidden for 30 years under the guise of philanthropy." The murmuring stopped. Every recorder activated. My father, Edward Ward, built a reputation as a benevolent industrialist. The Ward Foundation funded hospitals, shelters, care facilities across this state. We were celebrated for our charitable work. I pulled out the first document, held it up. But the Ward Foundation wasn't just charity. It was infrastructure for covering up adoptions that weren't legal, ethical, or consensual. When wealthy families wanted to adopt children being raised by their domestic staff, and when those caregivers wouldn't quietly disappear, my father provided a solution. I laid out the evidence methodically. Financial records showing payments to private psychiatric facilities. Falsified psychiatric evaluations declaring perfectly stable women mentally incompetent. Transfer records showing women moved between institutions for decades. These facilities weren't rehabilitation. They were prisons disguised as care homes, and the Ward Foundation funded them to keep inconvenient women silent. The room was completely still now. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the sound system. This is my father's voice, recorded in 1994, discussing one of these women. I pressed play. "The boy's better off. She was a good woman, I'll admit. But too visible, too emotional. We did her a kindness, really. He'll never know." The room erupted. Reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, chaos spreading like wildfire. I waited for silence, then continued. These women weren't unstable. They weren't delusional. They were erased for loving the wrong children. Children from wealthy families who wanted clean histories and didn't want complications like attachment or memory or truth. I read names. 12 women, the facilities that held them, the families who benefited. Some of the names were prominent: society figures, business leaders, people whose donations had gotten buildings named after them. Then I gestured to the back of the room. "This is Jane Norrison. She raised me from infancy to age 5. She loved me, cared for me, taught me what kindness meant. And in 1994, my father had her declared mentally incompetent and institutionalized. She spent 30 years in psychiatric facilities and care homes. Not because she was sick, because she remembered me." Hope wheeled Jane forward. The cameras turned, focused, captured every detail of her fragile dignity. Jane's voice shook, but it carried. "I just want other mothers to know they weren't crazy, they weren't wrong. They loved children who were taken from them, and they were punished for that love. We were robbed, and I want it to stop." I took a breath, delivered the final blow. Effective immediately, the Ward Foundation is dissolved. All assets will be liquidated. A new organization, the Norrison Trust, will be founded to locate and compensate women who were institutionalized in similar circumstances. Independent investigators will audit every facility, every payment, every buried story. The room exploded again. Questions fired like bullets. What about your position at Ward Global? What about the other families involved? Will there be criminal charges? Criminal charges will be pursued where possible. Other families will be exposed. And as for my position, I looked directly into the cameras. I'm stepping down as CEO. My focus now is justice for the women my father's system destroyed. The press conference devolved into chaos. My phone started vibrating immediately. Business partners, board members, society figures, some condemning, some distancing, a few praising what they called courage but felt more like basic decency. I ignored them all and went to Jane. That evening, I sat in Hope's small apartment watching the news coverage with Jane and Hope on either side of me. Every channel carried the story. My father's voice played on loop. Jane's face, dignified, weathered, real, appeared on screen after screen. Former domestic worker speaks out after 30 years of institutionalization. Ward Foundation scandal exposes systematic abuse of caregivers. Billionaire CEO destroys family legacy to expose father's crimes. Jane cried watching her name spoken with dignity on national television. Not hidden, not whispered, not dismissed as delusion. Honored, remembered, real. "You're not forgotten anymore," Hope said softly, holding Jane's hand. Jane shook her head, tears streaming. "I never wanted fame. I just wanted my boy back." I moved to kneel in front of her wheelchair, took both her hands in mine. "You have me, Mama Jane. For whatever time we have left, you have me." The doorbell rang. I answered it, exhausted and wrung out, expecting another reporter. Instead, it was a delivery. Dozens of flower arrangements, cards, messages from people across the country. Women who'd been told they were crazy for remembering children. Families searching for caregivers who'd vanished. People who'd been gaslit and silenced and told their memories were lies. "They believe you," Hope said, reading through the messages. "They believe all of you." Jane touched one of the flower arrangements. Yellow roses, like the ones I'd brought her, and smiled through tears. "My sunshine came back," she whispered, "and now maybe other mothers will find their sunshines too." I sat with them as night fell over the city, as my phone continued exploding with calls I wouldn't answer, as my carefully constructed life finished its collapse. And for the first time in 30 years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Home. 3 months later, the world looked different. The Norizon Trust had identified 17 other women in similar circumstances. Some had been reunited with children who'd spent decades wondering about the caregivers who'd vanished from their early memories. Others received compensation, public acknowledgement, and the one thing money couldn't buy, but truth could: validation that they hadn't been crazy, hadn't been wrong, hadn't imagined the children they'd loved. Legal battles continued. Some wealthy families fought back with expensive lawyers and carefully worded denials. Others settled quietly, preferring sealed agreements to public exposure. Criminal charges were pending in 3 cases, where psychiatric evaluations had been blatantly falsified. I'd stepped down as CEO of Ward Global Holdings. The board had accepted my resignation with barely concealed relief. My shares were sold, my ties severed, my name removed from the letterhead that had carried it for 7 years. Eleanor had moved to Europe. Switzerland, I'd heard through the lawyers handling the estate sale. She wouldn't speak to me. Had made it clear through intermediaries that as far as she was concerned, I'd committed the ultimate betrayal. Not against her, but against the Ward name. I didn't care. The family estate sold to a tech entrepreneur who planned to turn it into a wellness retreat center. I signed the papers without reading them, took the money, and bought something I'd never had before: a home. Not a penthouse, not a mansion, just a house outside the city, modest by my old standards, surrounded by gardens and trees and the kind of quiet that felt like healing. And on the property, I'd built a cottage. Bright, warm, with wide windows and a view of yellow roses. Jane's cottage. Moving day was chaos in the best way. Hope directing movers, Jane insisting she could carry her own boxes until Hope gently insisted otherwise, and me trying to remember where I'd packed the photos we'd spent weeks collecting. Photos of Jane as a young woman, vibrant and smiling. Photos Marcus had tracked down from old employers, from friends who'd lost touch, from a church she'd attended before everything fell apart. And photos of me as a child, the ones that existed before I became a ward. Found in storage facilities and safety deposit boxes Eleanor had never mentioned. We hung them in Jane's room, a life reconstructed from fragments. That evening, the 3 of us sat on the porch, Jane in a comfortable chair with cushions, Hope and I on the steps, watching the sunset over the garden. Jane started humming, the lullaby, the one that had unlocked everything. I joined in softly, the words coming back like they'd never left. My little sunshine, when the rain comes down. Jane's voice blended with mine, stronger than I'd heard it in months. Mama's love will always come around. We finished together, and for a moment, there was only the sound of crickets and the evening breeze through the roses. Do you remember what you'd say after I sang that, Dex? Jane asked, her eyes bright with tears and memory. I smiled, feeling my own tears come, that the sun always comes back. Jane reached out, touched my face with trembling fingers that had once braided my hair and built cereal box castles and promised me the world would be okay. And it did, she whispered. My sunshine came back. Hope watched us, her own eyes wet, and I understood that she'd witnessed something rare. Love that survives erasure, connection that outlasts institutional power, truth that waits 30 years for its moment. I thought about what I'd lost. Billions in net worth. The ward name that opened doors and commanded respect. Society invitations, board positions, the carefully cultivated image of success. But sitting here with Jane's hand warm in mine, with Hope beside us and the garden peaceful in twilight, I felt wealthier than I'd ever been in my penthouse overlooking the city. What will you do now? Jane asked. You've given up so much, baby. What comes next? I don't know, I admitted. I'm still figuring that out. But I'm learning to build something real. Something that matters. Jane smiled. That wise, gentle smile I was beginning to remember from childhood. You always were a builder. Even with those cereal boxes, you made beautiful things. We talked into the evening, about the Trust's work, about the mothers we'd found, and the ones still searching, about healing that came slowly, but surely. Hope shared plans for the family reunification program she'd be leading full-time. She'd left Silvercrest to work with the Trust, bringing her compassion and expertise to something that mattered more than any paycheck. I realized, sitting there listening to her speak with such passion, that hope had become essential to me. Not romantically, neither of us had time or energy for that, but as a partner in truth, a fellow builder of something worth building. As stars began appearing in the darkening sky, Jane grew tired. I helped her inside, walked her to her room with the photos and the comfortable bed and the windows that would let morning light wake her gently. Sleep well, Mama Jane. I will, baby. For the first time in 30 years, I will. I tucked a blanket over her, soft, warm, yellow like sunshine, and watched her eyes close. She was asleep within minutes, her breathing deep and peaceful. I found Hope still on the porch, looking up at the stars. Thank you, I said, for everything, for believing Jane, for risking your career, for helping me find the truth. Hope shook her head. You gave Jane her life back. That's everything. She gave me mine. I just didn't know I'd lost it. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the cottage light glow warm through the window where Jane slept. A beacon after 30 years of darkness. I thought about legacy, real legacy, not the kind carved in marble or printed in annual reports. Real legacy is built in remembered lullabies and hands held through darkness. It's built in cereal box towers and bedtime stories and promises that sunshine always returns. The greatest wealth isn't what you own. It's whose name you honor when the world forgets. It's whose truth you fight for when power tells you to be silent. The sun always comes back, I said softly, more to myself than to Hope. Inside the cottage, Jane slept peacefully, finally home. And this time, the sun was staying. Real legacy isn't built in boardrooms or on charity plaques. It's built in remembered lullabies and hands held through darkness. If this story touched you, if it made you think about the people who loved you before you knew what love meant, leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Subscribe for more stories that dig beneath the surface. And remember, the sun always comes back. Sometimes it just takes 30 years.